Okay, so we're going to do Genesis 7, ESV again. Take 2. Then the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens, also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Interesting. 100 years.
Yeah, and this says, then the Lord said, go into the ark. Now, other versions say, come into the ark. Come into the ark, like as if God is saying to him, "Come into the ark. I'm in here with you." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But this says, "Go into the ark." But I know other versions do say, "Come into the ark." Take with you 7 pair of clean animals. So he took 7 pair of clean animals, a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and its mate. So he didn't. Some people always say 2 by 2 the animals went into the ark. That's not really true. There were 7 pairs of clean animals. So that's a lot of animals.
Yeah. I don't really know what clean is in this context, actually. I should probably look that up. I know there's like lamb, you know. I think pigs are unclean. I don't know. Reptiles, I think, are unclean.
But this time were they clean and unclean?
I don't know. I figure.
When did God when did God set clean and unclean animals? I thought that was in the law.
Yeah, I think that it is, but I think that there was like kind of like an understanding, because the law is the written word for the nation. Right now, this isn't a nation. This is just a family, and they have a relationship with God. It seems like a direct relationship with God. Whereas the law is after they come out of Egypt and they're establishing a nation. So it's all what I think is true is that there's like these traditions that kind of go back to when God was kind of tangibly interacting with the individual elected families. So they must have had traditions and things like that that end up getting passed into the national law when the nation of Israel is established after they come out of exile in Egypt. I'm sorry.
There's nothing mentioned up to this point about clean and unclean animals. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I just think when you get into the future and they express them, I think it's probably. I just seem like it seems most likely that it's retroactive to an extent, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this like Moses is credited with writing this according to Jewish tradition. He's credited with writing this, and he's hundreds of years after this. So.
Yeah.
And he wasn't born into a family directly anyway. He was born into he was basically born into an Egyptian family. So he either would have been taught this or shown this through revelation. But he's credited with writing this, so it had to have been either tradition or revelation. So, and he's the one that wrote the law, so it makes sense that he would kind of like retroactively apply this. Or just,
yeah, I just wonder at this point whether Moses is writing or not. He's writing what God said to Noah. I'm just wondering. I was just never really thought about the fact that why was there clean animals at this point since the law had not even been given. So I never really thought about that till this moment in time.
Well, what I'm saying is if Moses wrote this, he wrote the law, right? Like he made the law. He credits himself with making the law in Exodus.
I know.
Well, right, but Moses wouldn't have written this until after the exile and after the establishing of the nation of Israel, like in the desert or something. So the law would have been given before he wrote this.
I know when Moses wrote the law. I mean, I understand when Moses wrote the law was after this. Get all that, but he is telling a story that God said to Noah before the law, before Moses was even around. He's simply writing the story. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals. I didn't even know. I didn't even know Noah would know about clean or unclean animals at that point. That's all I'm saying. I we didn't even know there was even such a thing mentioned to that point in time. But I did know it said this 7 pair of all clean animals, but I never really thought about the fact that the this I knew it was before the law, but I never really thought about why is there unclean animals, clean and unclean animals at that point. Anyway, uh, does not necessarily matter.
I just think that
Obvious.
that explanation makes sense to me because Moses is credited with writing this, and Moses would not have written because Moses writes Exodus like it's
You're almost saying that Moses is credited with writing this, so he went back and put that in there. That's what it said God said to Noah.
yeah, but what I'm saying is Moses for sure either inherited tradition or had revelation. So if he inherited this as an oral tradition and wrote it, my point is that makes sense to why the law included clean and unclean animals. Or if Moses had revelation after God revealed to him the law, it also makes sense that that would have been clean and unclean would have existed beforehand also. Like it would have been a tradition even in the past. So regardless whether revelation or whether tradition, it makes sense that it would have been in the law and been in the past. To me anyway. But
Right.
your turn. Verse
Okay.
6.
Well, here it says, "For 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." So we talked before about whether it being a local flood, which killed everything in that area, or was it a worldwide flood? This literally says, "In every living thing that I have made."
Mm-hmm.
So to me that speaks of a universal global flood.
Yeah, I think
Every living
seems
thing
to.
I have made. Yeah. So anyway,
God
verse.
uses a lot of hyperbole though. He uses a lot of it, especially when it comes to destruction and like destroying nations like the Canaanites and stuff. He says like utterly like annihilate or utterly destroy or whatever. And it doesn't mean to the last thing. It's like a hyperbolic um war style statement where you say like they were utterly destroyed or like the Indiana Pacers utterly destroyed the Los Angeles Lakers or something, and like it doesn't mean that they were literally killed. It means that they were
In Hebrew,
beaten.
according to what I'm reading here, every living thing means all existence,
Sure.
everything in existence.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
but utterly
I
utterly destroy means literally to destroy utterly. But it can also mean it can also be used hyperbolically, symbolically to represent like a lot of stuff was gonna die. Because like fish probably wouldn't have died. You know,
yeah. Well,
a
as
flood's
we'll
not gonna
see
kill
here, that
fish.
God says that every mountain under the heavens. So we'll see. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the waters came upon the earth, which means it was 100 years later because it said it. He in the previous chapter mentioned him being 500 years old when he started building the ark. Now, as I said before, I don't think Noah took 100 years to build the ark. I think he built it and then it just sat there for who knows how long. It just sat there. I've heard people say that it took Noah 100 years to build the ark, but it doesn't say that. It just says it was 100 years afterwards. Anyway, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood, clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground. Two and two, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. So,
Hmm.
so anyway, what was I going to say about that? Nothing. I was going to say anything about that. I was just mentioning what I said earlier. But anyway, uh, You can read the next one.
In the 600th year of Noah's life, I'm still thinking about Moses. Gnosis. I combined the two names. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the
So,
earth 40 days and 40 nights.
so it's clear here that this was not just rain from the sky. This was also the fountains from the earth. You know, the waters from the earth, everything. There was waters from the sky. It was just water coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
So the fountain, the great deep, burst forth. Anyway, the
Mm-hmm.
windows of heaven were opened up from the sky. It burst from the ground. And go ahead. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's just like calamity, like complete calamity. Maybe, probably, I mean, if we think about it, it's got to be like massive geysers or earthquakes that are just like, something triggers it, crashes land, and the groundwater just bursts
Yeah,
out from under the
because
tectonic plates and stuff.
there's a lot of proof. There's a lot of proof that during this time, and there's other scriptures that talk about this period of time, that this actually changed the surface of the earth, continents, and so on. So this was more than just it was rain. It was you're right. The whole earth went into a cataclysmic event here that changed everything, and I think it even changed continents and so on. But anyway, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham, and Japheth? How
Where are
do you
you?
pronounce that? 13.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
And Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in, and as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in.
And the Lord shut him in. Okay. Yeah, he didn't shut the door. God shut him in, literally.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah, Lord
shut
is
him.
all capitals, so that means it's that they put Yahweh. That's why YHWH.
Yeah, he actually shut him into the ark. So
Yeah, what do they
he
call it?
sealed him in
Tetra-
there.
Tetragrammaton? Grammaton? I forget what that phrase is.
What's that?
It's called the tetragrammaton or tetragrammaton, something like that. It's the
I don't know.
YHWH.
Oh, yeah. Where there's no vowels.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't use vowels. Exactly.
I think it's interesting that it almost
Is that
says. It sounds like it says that he like compartmentalizes them. Like he puts them all according to their kind in their own little area, all the livestock according to their kind in their own little area, creeping things according to their kind in their area. It
Right.
seems kind of interesting. It sounds like they were kind of like he would have had, like bird cages or something, almost like whatever, like separate
Yeah.
sections. Can't imagine the
Yep.
smell.
Well, the thing is, people, when they tell this story, they make it sound as if that Noah and his family really had this. Maybe they had all this work feeding these animals and so on. But this was really keeping them safe, and being in the ark was really kind of a supernatural event. God kind of had the animals migrate there. Remember we talked about that. Noah did not go out and gather these animals. They migrated there somehow.
Yeah, it seems.
And
it doesn't say one way or another, but it seems like they would have.
Yeah, I'm reading it here. Some wonder how the animals came to Noah, or how Noah got them. In Genesis 6:20, God said the animals would come to Noah by migration. In some animals, God has created the migratory instinct, which can operate in an amazing manner. It's no difficulty for him to miraculously place an urge to migrate to the ark. So we know that. We know, once again, if there's a God, he can easily tell the animals, you're going here, right? Go here.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. The whole thing is people think how could they have taken care of all those animals? This was like a supernatural event. God was actually keeping them safe. So um, I think God kind of did the work for this, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. The waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits. A cubit is 18 inches or 45 centimeters, covering them 15 cubits depth. So the mountains were all covered to that depth. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. See, it says everything. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Wow. Anyway, what was I going to say here? As I was reading, I was thinking about something. Well, to me, as I read this, you can start reading into this that it was a local flood that killed all life that had spread that far. But to me, this when you read this, it literally sounds like everything. It was a global flood, which is would explain some of the reasons that they find a lot of water uh, marine life fossils in mountains and stuff. You know what I'm saying? In some of the, I'm sure you know that there's a lot of marine life fossils found in mountains, and
Yeah, they seem super displaced.
yeah. So this explains it. There's really not a great way to explain it other than something like this. So um, anyway, um, I know what Hugh Ross says, and some of what he says I kind of agree, but I don't agree with him that it was just a local flood in the Mesopotamia. I think he said it's in the Mesopotamian plain, where as far as man had spread to that point. But that's not what I read when I read scripture. So not really sure exactly why he says that. But anyway, anything you want to say on this part?
Yeah, I think everything, it kind of specifies everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died.
Exactly.
So it sounds like, like fish and stuff wouldn't have been intended to be wiped out.
And I think there's a lot of proof on the earth in the geological record, fossil record. There's a lot of proof that shows that something happened sometime in the past to create what we see today. And it's like just in that video that movie that you said to watch, Genesis history, really goes into some good detail on explaining why the global flood explains a lot of the geography that we see on the earth today. So it doesn't need to be explained by long periods of time. It could happen in short periods of time, which we mentioned before. But a flood this catastrophic could definitely create, in the waters prevail on the earth 150 days. It could definitely create the Grand Canyon and the other things that we see on the earth today. So we know that that's very possible just by what we've seen in Mount St. Helens and other catastrophic events that created very similar what I'm trying to say, very similar geography. What do you call it? Land
geographical changes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, Mount St. Helens created in just a few days, just a short period of time, very on a smaller scale, but some of what you see in the Grand Canyon, you see a lot of different things that it should, but just in a few days. So it doesn't take long periods of time to create these type of things, even though that's what we were being told uh, by science today. So anyway,
By the community.
yeah,
Science
that's what we're
doesn't
told.
say anything. Scientists say things.
The scientific community is saying that long periods of time is what created the Grand Canyon. Water dripping water at a very slow pace is created, but it's also very possible that that was a huge amount of water. I like what that video I said. It said that it was a huge amount of water in a short period of time, rather than a little bit of water in a long period of time. Right? It can do the same thing.
Well,
So
the reason that they said that, or that they think that that's true, is because of the way that the layers are are organized. So sediment came in from
right,
outside places as it carved through these valleys, and sediment was being dropped in these consistent layers, showing that sediment that was picked up one place and moved somewhere else, it came through in these very consistent layers that goes across like 3/4 of the United States or something. But I think even
all around the world.
yeah, but I'm just talking about specifically the Grand Canyon, just to show that like likely wasn't a quick, slow thing, because that's something that's more tangible to U.S. citizens and stuff. But I'm sure that that's true.
They were just saying that they find these layers all over the world, so not just there. So um, which kind of shows that
Yeah,
this was a
I think it's the
universal
pattern. It's
event.
not the layers. It's the pattern, right? Like they're finding these sedimentary patterns where like you would think that it would be, if it was carved out after a really long period of time, then it wouldn't be a certain way and it wouldn't extend for such long for such long distances. But they're finding those patterns.
Right.
They're finding those patterns that look like large amounts of transferal of sedimentary like deposits over massive distances, um, and
Exactly.
they're consistent with uh, quick deposits, which would be a short period of
Right.
time and a large amount of water and sediment, unlike drips slowly moving through a canyon or whatever. But um,
Yeah. So anybody watching this, if you want to refer more to that, watch that. Look up what's it called? Genesis is
is
Genesis history? Is that what it's called?
mm-hmm. It's just on YouTube. You just Google it, or not Google. You just type in "is Genesis history" on YouTube, and it'll come up. It's pretty interesting. I don't agree with all of it. I think he does more so than I do, but
I do. I love it. It's good. It really explains a lot.
it's still interesting.
All
Yeah,
right.
I
So
think it's
that's
some
that.
credibility.
I think it does a good job in explaining a lot of this. But anyway, that's chapter 7. I think is that, and yeah. So that's chapter 7. Noah's and his family are still in the ark after 150 days. We're
So
gonna get into
long.
chapter 8.
I mean, it's kind of interesting though, right? Like a lot of animals, we already know that they can go like significant periods of time without eating. A lot of animals can, even today
Oh
in
yeah.
this generation,
Oh yeah.
especially cold-blooded
Yeah.
animals.
I don't know about. I think they had food on the ark, of course. Like I said, I believe this was a supernatural event, so God made sure they had everything to. God knew exactly what it was going to take for them to feed the animals during this period of time. And yes, animals can go for periods of time. Even human beings can go for periods of time without eating.
But even beyond
So
that, there are
I mean, they
animals
made it.
that hibernate. There are animals that don't require a lot of sustenance to go extremely long periods of time. So like if you just assume that everything eats as much as a rabbit has to eat, then of course this seems insane. But if you recognize that all sorts of different creatures have very different metabolism and requirements, where like bears, they eat a bunch of stuff and then they go find a hole to crawl in, and then they don't eat for whatever it is, 3 months or 4 months or whatever. And then you've got
Right.
crocodiles and all kinds of like snakes and all that stuff where they eat one gigantic meal and then they just chill under a rock for forever. So it's not really
Yeah, it doesn't say this, but it is also possible because, like I keep saying, that this was something unheard of. I mean, this was a migration of animals that God caused animals to come here. It's very possible whether it was a supernatural event. So maybe God did something and helped these animals to. Um, he did something so they could survive during this time. Maybe a little bit of food. Maybe they. It doesn't say this, but maybe they all went into hibernation. I don't know,
sure.
but I'm just simply stating that It doesn't say anything. It doesn't even say here that they fed the animals.
Right.
When you see stories of this, you see Noah and his family feeding the animals and doing all the work, but it doesn't say that. So we don't really know what happened with these animals.
I think it's a reasonable question, though. It's a practical question, and if you shouldn't, I don't want to put forth a supernatural answer where there isn't one, unless the practical ones don't make sense. And I think practical answers to this they are at least possible.
It's possible that they fed the animals and that animals can go for long periods of time. Some can hibernate. Yes, that's possible. It's also possible that God, during this event, helped them to sustain the animals so that they could live. I mean, I don't know. But,
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, during the Exodus from Egypt, God certainly fed the people, didn't He?
Yep.
With supernatural events.
Manna from heaven. Yeah.
And manna from heaven came down. That's not your normal thing that happens. It's a supernatural event that God fed the people to sustain them in the wilderness. So He can certainly sustain the animals and sustain Noah and his family somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that. So
I don't have a problem with it being supernatural. I just think where it doesn't say anything supernatural, I'm gonna try practical first. But I get what you're saying. Of course. If He created the universe, I'm fine with him. I'm fine with him popping some hippopotamus food into a boat.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't even mention food. So I'm just assuming that God was able to take care of them for 150 days. However, they were in here for longer than 150 days, but the waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days. They were in here for longer than that, for quite a period of time. So
200 days on a boat.
And they were in longer than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, 40 days, 40
and
nights.
They were in
150.
Here. Yeah, but in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, the ark came to. So it was a long time, 7 months or something. So a long time. And they did this without any TV, without any gaming systems. Can you imagine that? Oh my gosh. Anyway. So, where are we here?
Wait in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. I don't know where did you see the 7 months? I don't think I read that anywhere.
I'm in 8. I'm just looking in 8. I'm looking ahead in 8.
Oh. Okay, we can move to 8. I think that's fine. I'm gonna stop this video and prep it then.
Next video will be 8.